Hi everyone, this is our channel, Meet the Real Story. Please like, share and subscribe.
Hi, my name is Esmeralda, and I'm 21 years old. In my country, I was a heroine, a patriotic soldier, and a role model for my generation. But every story has a dark side, and the dark side of my story is that I became a traitor to my own country. I have to tell you my story quickly because, well, you'll find out shortly. My spy career began when some terrorists attacked my country. I was assigned to a counter-terrorism battalion, and we were fighting for our lives. Though we were a strong group, the terrorists were suicidal maniacs who had decimated our troops by just charging into our midst and detonating their explosive vests. Only a few of us survived, fighting against overwhelming odds. Then, an opportunity revealed itself. I noticed that the terrorists were hiding behind some large pipes, natural gas pipelines. As a matter of fact, I shot the biggest pipe and killed them all. I became the heroine to a grateful nation, and suddenly, people were naming their children after me. Everyone wished to be like me. Then, one day, I received a phone call from an anonymous caller who threatened to kill my family if I didn't do what he demanded. So, I met with him and his cronies. The moment I saw him, I could see that he meant business. He was a no-nonsense type of individual. Sure enough, he got straight down to business. He wanted me to tell them all our military secrets, weapons, plans, base, and camp locations, everything. If I didn't agree, they threatened to kill everyone in my family, starting with my father, who lived in another city. He said he was recording our meeting, said that if I betrayed this group, they would send the recording to my leaders. I submitted to their demands because I couldn't bear to cause my family harm. I now had to wear two faces, the heroine and the treacherous informer. I was pleasantly surprised to find that they paid me well for the information I was passing them. My own country hadn't paid me a dime for being their national heroine. So, at least I felt valued and appreciated by the other side. The utility of the information I was supplying them became evident as I watched news reports of new successful terrorist attacks on our country, military bases, camps, and armories. Naturally, our top brass knew that there must be a traitor in their midst, but they had no suspects because I was being very careful. Then, one day, as I was meeting with my terrorist contact to pass on some more information, our soldiers burst into the room and took the terrorists into custody. It turns out that my side had suspected me and had followed me there. The officer told me that I was the last person he would have ever suspected of being a traitor. I offered my hands to him to be handcuffed and taken in. I figured at least 10 years in prison, but he made no move to handcuff me. Instead, he just looked at one of his lieutenants, who then pulled out his gun, pulled back its slide, and chambered a round. It seemed that my sentence was to be executed, right here, right now.
Everyone dreams of winning millions of dollars with minimal effort. I had an opportunity to do so. Would you turn down such an opportunity? Yeah, I wouldn't either. My name is Mender, and I'm 21 years old. I live with my mother and my little brother. Dad left us 10 years ago. Mom tried to contact him, but failed, so she was forced to raise us alone. She turned down many marriage proposals after that. From an early age, I have dreamed of doing something good to pay Mom back for all of her efforts in raising us, so I decided to use my intellectual talent to do so. You see, I'm highly intelligent. I can memorize a vast amount of information. I always earned excellent grades in school. The only problem was that I knew I could never work hard to get rich in my own country because it was so poor. The only chance I had to get rich was to have a fantastic stroke of luck, like finding a gold mine or a magical money tree. My chance came along one day when a game show called Who Will Win Millions offered millions of dollars to the winner. In this show, you have to answer a series of questions ranging from easy to hard. The catch was that the last question was always extremely difficult to answer. The show announced that the next winner would win $3 million. That kind of jackpot was exactly what I needed to achieve my dream of helping Mom, so I decided to apply to get on the show. They called me 2 days later to tell me that I had been selected to be one of the show's contestants. When I arrived at the show's studio, the staff greeted me and got me ready. A coin toss decided who would go first. I got lucky again and won the toss. As expected, the questions started out easy and gradually became increasingly difficult. I was able to answer the next to last question. So far, so good. The show was live, and I was confident that my family was watching me, praying that I would win. The final question was next. Suddenly, the game show host called for a commercial break because the show's director wanted to talk to me. The director offered me $50,000 to be sure to answer the last question wrong. I was shocked. They cheated and played stupid games with people's dreams. I refused to play their game of skullduggery. The show resumed, and I was lucky and was able to answer the last question correctly. It was an esoteric knowledge question, but I'd read about it before, so I got lucky again. The host was visibly upset. Nevertheless, he asked if I wanted to say anything to the audience. I said I did, and then I proceeded to tell the audience that, on the last break, the show's director bribed me to miss the last question on purpose. At that point, the show's producer cut the live feed, and the director had security guards escort me off the studio stage into the back room where, well, I can't remember what happened there. Waking up later in a hospital bed, I spent weeks recovering from mysterious bruises all over my body. I received a small reward from the authorities for exposing a scam. It wasn't $3 million, but I was satisfied anyway. The show was canceled, and the staff were arrested and served some prison time. I gave my reward to Mom. What luck.
Our feelings are always hard to control. We are humans after all. Sometimes we do things we can't explain, just because we feel that way. I had a student named Daniel, a sweet and innocent child. I was prepared to do anything for him, but don't judge me just yet. First, let me tell you my story. My name is Jolene. I'm a 21-year-old math teacher at a primary school. I live with my sister and my mother. My house was next to the school where I work. I love teaching, and I like teaching the students in creative ways. They loved me, and I loved them. Daniel was a special student, though. Our story began at the start of the new year. It was the first day of school. I missed all my students over the summer break. I missed them so much that I stood by the door to welcome them back. Before I started my first lesson, Mr. Smith, the student affairs officer, knocked on the class door, with Daniel hiding behind his back. Mr. Smith greeted the class and asked them to greet Daniel, but Daniel was too shy and didn't move. So I went over to him to take him by the hand, but he pulled his hand away, which embarrassed Mr. Smith. I asked him to greet his classmates, so he went and he stood in front of the class and he said, "Hello, I am Daniel." Then he went and he sat at the very back of the class. He didn't talk much with the other kids. He didn't like to interact with anyone. Daniel always looked sad, and I thought to myself, he's only 8. What could possibly have made him that way? I tried to get close to him, but he resisted all my efforts. Sometimes he looked like he was hiding some big secret, and later on, I learned what it was. One night, when I was surfing the social media, I came across a horrible news story about a jealous husband killing his wife and another man right in front of his son. The child had been none other than my new student Daniel. Reading that sad story, I started understanding why Daniel was acting that way. I decided to try brightening his life a little. Every day, I would buy a small present and put it on his desk. At first, it had no effect, but slowly he came to love that. During break time, I would sit beside him, and we would share food together. I would get him involved in class activities. On his birthday, I arranged a surprise party with his class, his grandmother, and myself. He was so happy that day. After the party, he hugged me and he told me that he loved me. I hugged him tightly. He was not just a student to me. I treated him like he was my own son. He told me that he wanted to call me mother, and that made me so happy. After his grandmother died, he came to live with me. We faced a lot of problems together, but I followed his success in life with pride. Daniel is all grown up now. He's graduating from the Faculty of Engineering. I am so proud of what he has made of himself.
I do not panic. I simply take a breath, sit down on a stone bench nestled against some building I read about once, but can't remember the name of, and scan my cartoony tourist map for anything that looks familiar. But nothing. Give me a little credit though. Having grown up in a town with a population of just under 2,000 people, a town with a farmland and no streetlights, I am a country pumpkin who's been dropped off in a major city. I'm lucky I haven't wandered off the cliffs by now, only 2 days into my semester abroad. But culture shock is one of the main reasons I came to Dublin. So even though it is terrifying and unfamiliar, I know that living in another country for 5 months will definitely help me grow. As they say, the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having the new eyes. The weather in Ireland changes quicker than a middle school crush. By now the sky has turned a shade of grey and raindrops are beginning to spatter onto the map in my hands. I had been warned of the rain, repeatedly, before coming. It always falls softly at first, quiet as a page being turned, delicate as lace, but that's all just foreplay. When the wind comes, and it always does. It's no matter though. Studying in this city was one of my greatest desires and I knew the weather was part of the package. Dublin was meant to be experienced in the rain. The streets are full of people. I wonder if they can smell the tourist on me. I've been in Dublin for roughly 48 hours and it has yet to feel like home. Maybe it's because I haven't had time to unpack, eat a full meal, or even think. At one point, I was awake for 35 straight hours and learned that there is a little difference between delirium and insanity. To fight the chaos, I cling to the moments of serenity and hoard them like poker chips I can cash when things become too hectic. My most peaceful moment came on the plane ride here. The flight went by quickly. The wind was at our backs and the stars were ahead. As we approached, the Dublin skyline lit up like an artificial constellation. My heart was filled with promise knowing that it would soon beat along with the city's pulse. And even though I have yet to feel at peace, my heart continues to say, you will, you will, you will. The rain stops, umbrellas are tucked away, ready to be drawn when the moment calls again. I think a small part of me likes being lost. I know that if I really wanted to, I could ask any of the passers-by where I am or where I need to go. Everyone I've met so far has been so nice they'd likely offer me a ride there and a pint along the way, let alone directions. It seems strange by European standards, but the Irish people love Americans. And I mean love. They love Americans the way Americans love themselves. They want to know where I am from in the States and what it's like there and what brought me to their neck of the woods. All of it. And they really listen, absorbing every word and filtering them as willingly as if it was oxygen. There are bound to be some bad people here in Ireland because there are bad people everywhere. But with an open mind and a positive outlook, they're hard to find. Ireland as a whole is a country I've long idealized. Its postcards should be hung in the Louvre. Its culture is so rich. It is also home to my favorite writers, as well as my ancestors. I seldom contemplated my heritage before going abroad. Since I'm not of one ethnicity, I never had one predominant country to identify with. My family tree is like a European Union cocktail. Equal parts Irish, English, German, with just a splash of Dutch, shaken and not stirred. Living in Ireland briefly has changed that. I feel a part of it. I feel it in the words of the Irish people. I feel it in the quiet that hangs over the treeless forever-reaching fields. And I feel it in the river as it churns, endlessly dark and endlessly deep. So, as I sit on the same stone bench, gazing at the same animated map, I realize I'd rather be lost here in Dublin than be found anywhere else in the world.
My son killed me. Yes, you read that correctly. I am not a ghost or an evil spirit that needs rescuing. I have a brave heart. My name is Megan, and I hope to inspire you with my story. I lived with my father and my sister Marlene after the death of my mother, who died from an illness. Though I was only 18 years old, I became responsible for taking care of my whole family. I did everything for them, like cooking, cleaning, washing, etc. My father was a great man, and he did his best to make us happy. I supported both my sister and my father. We faced a lot of problems together, illnesses, financial problems, school, and the like. But there came a day when I had to make a life and death decision at my young, tender age. I fell in love, as any girl my age tends to do. My sweetheart turned out to be loved my neighbor, a guy named Dave. We had grown up together, and we shared everything. Love, sadness, jokes. Our dreams had evolved as we grew up too, so we decided to marry. He knew all about my life circumstances, so he chose a flat near my family for me. We had a nice party and celebrated with our families and friends. Every day, he proved himself to be a responsible man. He loved and respected me, and I him. Finishing my studies was one of my dreams, and Dave supported me in every way to achieve it. But my biggest dream was to have a baby. But sometimes life just isn't fair. One day, while cleaning the house, my heart began beating rapidly, and I couldn't breathe well. I was barely able to call out to Dave, who came immediately when he heard me cry for help. I had had this symptom before when I was younger, but I never told my father because I didn't want to worry him. Dave took me to the hospital, where a doctor said I had a serious heart condition. And not only that, I was pregnant too. Pregnancy and a heart condition do not a good combination make. So we had to choose between the baby's life or mine. My father and Dave asked me to abort the baby, though they tried hard to persuade me. I resolutely refused. I agonized a lot during my pregnancy. My father and Dave were so worried for my safety. My father and Marlene left their flat to live with me. In addition, Dave cut back on his working hours to stay with me. The day came when I went into labor. They took me to the hospital, where the doctor checked me over and pronounced that my condition was so serious that I wouldn't be able to survive the childbirth. My family and I were shocked. I held Dave's hand and told him that I was strong enough to survive this. Dave hugged me, crying tears like a river. I was so afraid, but I did my best to hide that fact. I looked to my protruding belly and said to my baby, "I want you to know that I sacrificed myself for you. You had better grow up to be a great young man. I love you." Then the baby started pushing its way into this world. The scene fades to blackness. The baby is born. Suddenly, a year later, a birthday party is being held. The baby is now 1 year old. A woman is singing with the baby and her family. The woman looks at you and winks. Megan says, "Haha, fooled you. I lived through the childbirth. Sometimes life gives us a second chance, but you have to be willing to accept the risk."
Love what you do until you can do what you love. This is a famous quote that inspires people to seek out their dream job. I heard that quote at school before I graduated and entered the working world. What's that, you ask? Was I successful in achieving my dream? Well, I came this close. Let me tell you about it. My name is Max and I'm 19 years old. Poverty and I are intimate friends and constant companions. I live in one of the poorest neighborhoods in my city. Most of the local citizens work at the seaport. The rest of us, we make a living by scavenging through and collecting rubbish. But I wasn't just an ordinary rubbish collector. No, sir, I was a specialist in that field, like my dad before me. Dad taught my brothers and me how to do it expertly. This is how it worked. Factories liked to use recycled materials to reduce the cost of buying new materials, so we would go to the city rubbish pile and separate out materials into different piles, such as plastics, glass bottles, milk cartons, tin cans, and so on. Then we would sell those materials to factories for reuse in making their products. This recycling process saved the factories a ton of money, but unfortunately, that didn't translate into a ton of money for us rubbish collectors. I had a dream one day of opening my own factory and just sitting back and watching the money flow in. When I told Dad that, he told me that good fortune only happens for a select few people. After hearing those words, I went to bed and dreamed about my future factory. Little did I suspect that my dream might actually come true someday. One day after working late collecting rubbish, while on the way home, I suddenly heard voices coming from a large rubbish pile in front of my home. It seemed that people were using that pile as a place of business to sell drugs and booze. An argument was brewing between two groups. Each group were wielding sticks and knives as makeshift weapons. One guy in Group A had a gun and shot someone in Group B, so someone in Group B stabbed gun guy in Group A. After that, a full-on fight ensued, with everyone in both groups joining in the fray. Within minutes, I heard approaching police sirens, which caused the fight to break up and both groups to run away, leaving the bleeding gun guy lying on the sidewalk. I tried to help him by staunching his bleeding. As I was doing so, I noticed a lottery ticket beside him with a letter saying that it was the winning ticket for $1 million payout. I froze. I looked around. No one was watching, so I acted, somewhat ignobly. Then I left quickly. If the police were to arrive and find me with the bleeding man, they might think that I had done it. I rushed home and fell into an easy chair, taking a deep breath of relief. While I was telling Dad about what had happened, there was a knock on the door. It was the Group A and B gangs. The spokesperson for the two groups held a knife in my direction and said, "Hand over the lottery ticket or die where you stand." Needless to say, I handed it over post-haste. But then he said, "I'm sorry. You've seen too much. You have to die." I pleaded, "But I didn't see anything, I swear." Suddenly, there was a flash from a camera, and the whole group of thugs began laughing. "You've been pranked," Dad said, as he stepped out from the crowd. My brothers were behind him laughing too. "You've been pranked," Dad said, as he stepped out from the crowd. My brothers were behind him laughing too. While relieved that my imminent death had been postponed, I was deeply saddened that I had lost my $1 million chance to get my dream factory. What rubbish.